Hey, I'm Dr. Jake Patton, and I'm going to be your instructor for SHS 205, which is a survey of communication disorders. Um, what are we going to learn? I mean, a survey of communication disorders. What can we talk about? Well, the first thing, the first week or two of class, or actually three, um, we'll be talking about kind of what are communication disorders and what kind of jobs can you get as an SLP, speech language pathologist, or an AUD, a doctor of audiology, um, and related fields like an SLPA, which is a speech language pathology assistant. And if you get a degree like mine, a PhD, what can you do as a research professional and professor and things like that. We'll also talk about other things that you need to know for the field. Then we'll transition into the actual communication disorders. We'll discuss things from stuttering to autism spectrum disorder and beyond. And then the last portion of class is going to be devoted to communication disorders in the hearing modality, and we'll talk about that as well. So this course is going to put together a lot of different aspects, really. It's not, if you've had intro to psychology, that just kind of covers like a little bit of each type of psychology. Not so much about the kind of jobs that you can have, the things that you're going to be required to do in any of those jobs. And not so much about the anatomy either. This is a little bit different than that. So when we talk about the actual different disorders, it'll be sort of like a Psychology 101, but it's a little bit more targeted, a little bit more trade oriented, a little bit. And then also there is going to be some anatomy mixed in. So you're kind of getting a taste of all the classes that you're going to be taking after 205. So really it is just like a dip your toe into this entire major. So whichever path you choose, SLP, AUD, PhD, or the SLPA program that we started recently, this will kind of give you an intro to what that's going to be like. So before we talk more about the class, I will tell you about me just a little bit. So I was born, this is an online class, so there's not going to be as many people that have possibly gone to the same high school. That's fine. So it's okay. Whatever. It's all right. I was born in Mesa, Arizona, and then I graduated from Hamilton High School. I went to ASU for my Bachelor of Science. Then I got into graduate school where I did a master's and a PhD. Those are both in cognitive psychology, where I specialized in auditory and visual perception. Really, I specialized in like all the like senses, sensation and perception is really what I specialized in. But the auditory and visual stuff is what ended up helping me land my job in the speech and hearing sciences area. So a lot of that auditory work comes in handy, and also some of a little bit of psycholinguistics and memory knowledge and stuff like that. If you're in 367 with me, you'll see a lot more of that than you will in this class. And I'm also a runner. Here I am with these two other guys. We just completed one of those really cool mud obstacle courses. Of course, this obviously was like over 2 years ago because these don't exist right now. But it was fun. Okay, let's talk about my research really quickly. So this is the kind of stuff that I'm into. Swear words is the first one. It's by far one of the most fun studies that I've done in recent memory. But what we did was we looked at the phonemes that are actually used in swear words. Now, this is the intro class, so if you don't know what a phoneme is, that's okay. I'll tell you, a phoneme is the smallest unit of speech. You'll learn about this more. You don't have to remember it now. but the smallest intelligible different unit of a speech sound. So something like ah, e, oo, w, anything like that. Those are all phonemes. So we're looking at the vowel phonemes that are used in swear words, and we realize that some sounds are used much more often in swear words than they are in not swear words. And some sounds aren't used at all in swear words, but they are used quite often in not swear words. Now, clearly, this isn't true for, I'm not going to say like only swear words use and you can think about some great swear words that use is one of the really great phonemes that we found in this. Is another one. And not a lot of phonemes for swear words in the E and oo areas. Swear words don't tend to use E and oo, but regular words do. So, of course, this isn't like clean cut where it's like swear words only use and That's not true. You can see that in this graph here. Dark bars are swear words, light bars are every other kind of word, and then each of these pairs of graphs is a phoneme. So you can see that it's not completely clean cut, which you wouldn't expect from actual research to see things like, only swear words use only this kind of phoneme. So this is what we expect. But you can also see that there are some places where the swear words are way higher than these light bars. It's amazing. What we think is going on is that phonemes like E and oo, those tend to be the things that we use for like young children, babies, dogs, cute things. It's things to like reduce how harsh something is. I can't like toesies and things like that, right? So you don't usually have that in your swear words. And it seems like somehow we kind of work this in. I don't think we do it consciously. I don't think that anyone who's using language like this does this consciously. It's just something that we know about our language, and it kind of moves away from that area. I've also looked at some other languages, and maybe if we have time for an extra lecture or something like that, or if you're interested in it, I can post a video about it. But anyway, we're going to move on to the next thing. I've also looked at this dundun. The dundun drum, or the Nigerian talking drum, is what more people have heard it called, but it's actually called the dundun. And that's what this guy down here is playing. This drum can change its pitch, and dundun drummers use it to convey speech. So you can actually, by changing the pitch of this drum, you can like say things to other people. In fact, you can tell stories with the drum. So what I've looked at is how do we map speech onto the drum? There's a lot of components of speech. We've got the pitch of the speech, we've got the loudness, we've got all sorts of formants. Again, that's a word that you might not understand yet, but you will by the end of this class. You'll know what a formant is. There's a whole bunch of different things going on with speech. Clearly, you can kind of infer that, like there's so much more than just a drum that can change its pitch. But somehow that's compressed into this drum, what can be produced by this drum, and it's intelligible to people who know the drum language. But how is that done? And that's one of the things that I've been investigating. And then lastly, and this isn't really related to anything that we do here at SHS, so I won't talk about it as much, is research on tetrachromacy, which tetrachromacy is the presence of a fourth color cone in your eye. So most of us only see three color dimensions. If you're colorblind, you're only seeing in usually two, although you can have people that are colorblind that only see in like one color dimension. So it's sort of like a black and white. But the typical kind of colorblind is just two cones. But there are people who have four, so they have like an extra dimension of color that most of us can't even comprehend. We don't even know what it could look like. So I've been researching that. What is the perception that they have of these colors. How do they see them? When do they see them? What kind of atmospheric or whatever conditions can help bring these colors out? We're trying to figure out like, what is the fourth cone. Okay, so that's my research. Let's talk about this class. The class is made up of 5 exams, 6 quizzes, and 3 homeworks. That's mostly, if you keep your eye on this, that's where you're going to be. It's actually 8 quizzes. So sorry about that. There should be 8. It's 5 exams, 8 quizzes, 3 homeworks. You have a quiz for each week. Oh, it's 7 because we have 7 weeks. There's 8 weeks. The last week is kind of like the finals week, sort of. There's 7 quizzes. 5 exams, 7 quizzes, 3 homeworks. This is your big thing. These are the things to keep on your radar. So there's 5 exams. There's going to be an exam after each like kind of unit. It's not each week, but it's each sort of unit. So there's 4 main exams and then a final. So I'm kind of breaking up the whole class into 2-week chunks. You're going to have a test at the end of each one of those. But the thing is, the lowest one of these is dropped. So if you've taken the first 4 exams and you are very comfortable with the scores that you've gotten on those, you don't have to take the final because it'll go in as a, you won't take it, it'll go in as a 0. And then as the lowest grade, because it's a 0, it gets dropped. And then your score is only made up of the 400 points from those exams. So you, in a way, don't have to take the final. Of course, you can also then just, if you like the scores you have, you can just like take the final and see what happens. If you don't do well, it gets dropped. If you do really well, then the other lowest exam gets dropped. So essentially, the lowest exam is going to get dropped, no matter what. Whether you choose not to take one of these and then that 0 gets dropped, or you take them all, the lowest one is going to get dropped. They're all going to be done online, of course. You're going to have to use we don't use RP now in this class. I use Respondus Lockdown Browser. So you'll have to use the camera as well, the Respondus monitor. So somebody will be watching you while you take this, and there's guidelines when you start it, like don't have anybody come in the room. They're going to have you do a room check to make sure you don't have any like cheating materials out or anything like that. But you're going to have an almost unlimited amount of time to take it. So these exams are the same exams I give in my in-person classes. They have an hour and 15 minutes. You're going to have 2.5 hours. So it's not unlimited, but it's like way more than you should need. When I look at the times that people actually spend on this, the average is like 40 minutes. So you'll have definitely enough time to take this. So you'll be all right. There are 7 quizzes, but you're going to have 2 attempts for each of these quizzes. What I recommend you do is the first time you take a quiz, and these are at the end of the week, so you'll learn all of the material, then you'll take a quiz. I think the first time you take the quiz, you should not use notes. You don't have Respondus Lockdown Browser or Monitor with the quizzes. It can be open note, but for you to do well in the class, don't use your notes the first time. Just see what you get and see what you don't. Like, see what you know. Use it to test yourself. Now, the second time, this is the time for all the points. So do pull out your notes. You know which questions you didn't get right. So then you know the ones that you need to study. And you know the ones that you need to pull out your notes and look for the answers for. So you should get 100% on all these quizzes. Really, they're just kind of there to help you quiz yourself and see what you need to know for the exams. So that's how I recommend taking those quizzes. And then you've got 3 homeworks. 2 of these are going to be written papers, and the last one is a final presentation that you're going to kind of do either as a video or just a voice recording. Actually, I think it might only allow you to do a voice recording, which is fine. So the first paper, we'll talk about this. There's going to be more information about this in the class. The first paper is just kind of about the career that you are thinking about going into. SLPA, SLP, AUD, PhD, one of those. Or maybe you have a different major and you're just taking this as an elective. Well, then tell me about that career that you're going into, architecture, design, or whatever. Also, that's the first paper. Pretty short, pretty easy, just kind of getting you thinking about your career, the steps that you're going to need to take to get there. The second paper is you're going to deep dive into a communication disorder. It can be a communication disorder that we talk about in the class, but it doesn't have to be. We don't talk about things like misophonia. We don't talk much about ADHD at all, but there's not a whole lot of speech issues that crop up with that, so that one doesn't really work. So that's kind of what like misophonia is a sound disorder where people have intense reactions to certain kinds of sound. That's a communication disorder that can hinder you from being able to communicate or do a job or something like that in a communicative basis. So that would work. But then something like ADHD, there's not really a communication issue. I bring that up because oftentimes people want to use ADHD if they're choosing a disorder that we don't talk about in class. It doesn't really work because there's not a whole lot of communication stuff that goes along with it. ASD we use because there are a lot of communication problems that are associated with it, even though we don't usually think of autism as a communication disorder. So if you're unsure, you can certainly send an email to me or the TA and we'll give you the go-ahead or say, I don't know, think of a different one. But you're just going to deep dive into it. So what I want you to do is choose the thing that is the most interesting to you and research it. And it'll kind of also hopefully help you plan out your career trajectory. You might learn something in this class that's really interesting that you want to go into, like aphasia. Maybe you already know something that you want to go into, and this will give you the first chance of many that you'll have throughout your college career to learn a lot more about that disorder. The final presentation is taking that second homework, the deep dive, and making slides, like what you see here and what you're going to see throughout the rest of the course, and presenting it to the rest of the class. Not live, but you're using something called VoiceThread where you can record it and then you'll submit it, and I'll watch it. I'll give you a grade. The TA will watch it. The TAs will watch it and give you a grade, and your fellow classmates can also watch it for more information on different disorders. A lot of people do really well on this. I've learned things from watching a lot of student presentations because sometimes you guys dig into areas that I didn't necessarily know existed. I mean, I can't be a specialist in all the areas, right? So it's a fun thing, and I'd recommend watching certainly the ones you're interested in, if not all of them. It's a lot of good information. Okay, there might be extra credit. A lot of studies are still kind of shut down because of coronavirus right now, but some online ones are getting back up, which, of course, being an online class, most of you will only be able to participate in online studies anyway. So hopefully I'll be able to post a few studies that are going right now for extra credit. If there are none, I'm going to come up with at least one non-research participation extra credit assignment for you. So there's a couple ways to gain some extra points in the class. Okay, I want to talk about the Disability Resource Center, which is now called SAILS. I don't know what that acronym stands for. Students, I don't know. I'm not even going to try. Anyway, I'm trying, but I'm not coming up with it. I don't know what the L is. Anyway, no, I just got to stop. I'm trying to figure it out. Okay, so anyway, whatever it stands for, it's something similar to Disability Resource Center. You should visit them either in person or digitally if you think that there's any sort of accommodation you could use. Now, clearly, there are some things that you might know. Like if you know you have dyslexia, this is, of course, a thing you should get in contact with the DRC. But not everybody knows that they have dyslexia. I've had a lot of students who have been dyslexic their whole lives, and once I've said something about dyslexia in this welcome video, they'll go get tested and, oh my gosh, they have dyslexia. So then they get some accommodations like extra test time, both in this class and in all of their other classes, because it'll take extra time, to read and things like that, to understand what's going on. There's also some new fonts that have been developed that kind of combat dyslexia by having different bottoms and tops of letters. We tend to like our letters to be symmetrical, mostly symmetrical. I mean, if you think of a K and a C and the Y doesn't work, the D, things like that, they're symmetrical top to bottom. So what these fonts do is they make them slightly different. The bottoms are kind of like bigger, and that helps combat dyslexia. So it could be as simple as, talking to the DRC and they can help you get some sort of program that like changes the fonts on everything, or a browser extension that changes the fonts on everything. You can download it yourself, like on your Kindle and stuff like that. It's really cool. We'll talk about it more later. But any of these things, test anxiety, auditory processing disorder, misophonia, all these things, if you feel like you might have something like this, visit the DRC/sales. You can visit them digitally. You can talk to them over Zoom. Some of you are in, like places like Tennessee, Alaska, the United Arab Emirates. I haven't had anybody in Australia yet, or Africa, but I'm waiting. Really, so far, it's only been 2 continents. Kind of bummed about that. I got 5 more to go. 4. I don't think I'm going to get anybody in Antarctica. Anyway, it never hurts to check it out, right? I mean, the most that they're going to do is if you don't qualify, they're going to say, hey, you don't qualify. It's fine. Nobody else knows. It's you and the person that you talk to at the DRC. So there's no reason to be embarrassed about thinking that there's something and then you don't get accommodations for it. It's fine. If you do have something going on, I mean, this could make the difference between you graduating and not, depending on how severe it is. So it's definitely something to check out. And again, most people will not know. It's you, the person you talk to at DRC, and then I get a notification of who needs what accommodations, but I don't know what the reason is. So your, medical history is still your own. So why not check it out if you need it? One other thing is this class is like totally diversity positive. I come from a diverse background. I don't look like it, but I do. And there's a lot of diversity in my extended family. I'm also on the SHS Jedi Council for both curriculum and hiring practices. See, this is me right there. I don't know why they call it the Jedi Council. It stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And then also, of course, the acronym is Jedi. We used to be called DEI. I mean, I guess this is more memorable, but it still makes me think about Star Wars, which isn't a bad thing. But anyway, I totally believe in equitable treatment for everybody. Like, I want everybody to succeed. I want everybody to have the chance to succeed. I do want everybody to succeed, but it's not like I'm just going to give everybody an A+. You still have to do well in your exams. So don't screw that up. But I want everybody to be able to do well on their exams. There aren't a whole lot of diverse topics in this class, which is not 100% true. I reused this slide from my 367 class, and I should have got rid of that last thing. In 367, there's not a whole lot of diverse topics. In this class, there's a lot of diverse topics. I mean, if you think about disorder-wise, every different lecture almost is talking about a different disorder, or two or three. So, of course, we talk about a lot of different topics. We don't necessarily talk about a ton of gender differences or differences in ethnicity that contribute to these. Well, there's not a lot of, depending on the disorder, there's not a ton of ways that ethnicity contributes, which is, just kind of shows that we're all more alike than we are different. But we do talk about kind of from a, like I said, from a disorder standpoint, there's a lot of diversity. So that's not exactly true what I say here. And I think I'm going to try to work in a discussion about health equity in different communities, just so that we're all aware of like underserved communities in terms of SLP services, AUD services, and things like that. It's an important issue. But anyway, nobody needs to feel, like this isn't an open and welcoming class, because it should be. And I want to promote that in the few discussion boards we have. There aren't many, because I know people hate those. But in the few that there are, it's an open and welcoming environment. Okay, and then so lastly, I want to quickly talk about just, we're all health professionals here. We're all health professionals and scientists, or you're about to be health professionals and scientists. And your TAs and I are health professionals or scientists. I'm more of a scientist than a health professional. Depending on which TA you have, they're more one than the other as well eventually. But these are kind of allied areas. If you're an SLPA or an SLP, or if you're going to be an SLPA or an SLP, you're considered a medically adjacent professional, which just means that you work closely with the medical community. You're not necessarily a doctor, you're not going to do open heart surgery, but you are an essential member of the healthcare team. AUDs, depending on what you do and any extra schooling that you have, you're either medically adjacent or you are a medical professional. PhD, you're a scientist. And other people can be scientists as well. It's more about the mindset and how you approach problems and what you do than having the degree necessarily. But one thing that you're taught as a PhD, how the way that that's different from other doctorates is how to do science, how science is done. So MDs, AUDs, JDs, these are all different doctorates that you can have, but the PhD is one that focuses on how science is done. Maybe not if you get a PhD in philosophy or like English literature. They don't focus on science. But in our area, and in also cognitive science and things like that, the PhD focuses first on this is how science is conducted, and then on your particular area of interest. So as such, as these health professionals and scientists, we all have a responsibility to educate ourselves on health information and also to promote healthy behavior and science-based practices around us as well, both in professional environments and also in personal environments as well. I mean, obviously, we're still in the middle of a global health crisis, right? We're doing a little bit better here in the U.S. There's a amazing rollout of vaccine, but other countries are struggling to get that vaccine. Certain communities in the United States are resistant to the vaccine. So we're still in the middle of this crisis. And the crisis is also being plagued by a huge wave of anti-intellectualism and also just complete misinformation. In some cases, it's foreign disinformation, but we don't need to get into that. So because of that, I want to cover a couple myths and bullshit that you should be aware of, and that you can tell other people if you get into a conversation where you want to talk about this. So the first myth is that scientists are not objective or that we have a bias. Well, actually, it's true. One thing that we're taught when scientists are being trained to be scientists is that everyone has a bias. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what your profession is. You can be the most scientific person there is. You still have a bias. Even as much as like we just want our hypothesis to be right. So we're going to test it and then we want that to be the way it is. However, we're also taught that everyone has a bias so that we can be aware that we may be putting our bias into things. We're also taught how to do science to take out the bias. So it is true that our opinions could be biased, but when we do the actual science the right way, it's not biased. A good example of this is global gun violence data. So I had an opinion on gun violence. I downloaded a whole bunch of information from different agencies from around the world and also here in the U.S. I wanted to compare gun violence rates in different countries in a bunch of different ways. I had a thought of how it was going to work out. If you are on Twitter at all, you'll see that liberal people have one idea about how gun violence data comes out. Conservative people have a different idea about how gun violence data comes out. And I thought I could use my skill as a data scientist to really figure out what's actually going on here. And it didn't work. It wasn't that I was proved wrong. Basically what happened was I proved both of these sides wrong because the gun violence data is so wacky that it can't really fit any narrative. The United States is such an outlier when you compare it to other countries in terms of number of guns, in terms of violence, in terms of all this stuff, that you can't draw conclusions from the other countries about the U.S. It's just too wacky. There's other ways that you can look at the data that you can come up with a way to go forward from there, but certainly not by comparing it to other countries. So it doesn't matter who tries to tell you like, well, when you compare these other countries, the U.S., blah, 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 it doesn't work. It doesn't work if you do the data analysis on it the right way. So anyway, I had a bias. I thought I was going to be able to figure something out. And because I did the science the right way, it didn't work. Like I proved myself wrong. The other thing is that science is a cycle. We're going to talk about this in class, but we're constantly revising our findings. We do that with other people replicating our studies. We do it with new studies, kind of moving larger ideas forward into new areas. So those are kind of like replications, but extending a theory into a new domain, and also coming up with new ideas. So when you see something like early on in the pandemic, we saw that scientists were saying like, hey, maybe you should avoid taking ibuprofen because we think it might make you more susceptible to getting a worse, like more sick with coronavirus. If you're taking ibuprofen and you get coronavirus, you're worse off than if you're not taking ibuprofen. This is an early thing that they thought. They also thought vitamin C was really helping combat coronavirus. And then a couple months later, that was retracted. Well, some people think this is scientists not knowing what they're doing, but actually this is proof that science is working. This is showing that someone has found some data, they've analyzed it, and they're presenting it to the scientific community and the public at large. And then through replications and more data, we discover that this is actually not the case. And so then we self-correct. Science is a self-correcting cycle. So if you're wondering, take ibuprofen. You don't have to worry about getting more sick. Vitamin C does not seem to help in this case. And airborne has never worked. So why do we sell it? It is possible the last thing I saw about the on this data is that zinc lozenges may still help shorten the duration of coronavirus. It does. It is clinically proven to shorten the duration of the flu and cold. So it's certainly not going to hurt. You should go buy yourself some zinc lozenges if you're sick with anything. Having a testable and falsifiable hypothesis is really the only way that we can find like universal truths and advance society. It's the only, like, science is really the only way to discover these things. We can discover things with experience, but that's not testable. A lot of times our experience is wrong. We attribute a cause when there isn't one. We attribute a cause to the wrong thing. Science is the only way to really narrow down what really is causing something, and how can we change it? How can we replicate it? How can we do anything from there? So we have to be always promoting the science and doing science the right way. Not every scientist does science the right way, so it's important also to do the science correctly, not sloppily. The second myth is that you can lie with statistics. Again, this myth is actually true. You can lie with statistics, but there's rules and stuff to follow. I'm a editor for, I'm a reader. I shouldn't say I'm an editor. An editor is like an actual position with a scientific journal, but I'm a reviewer for scientific articles. And one of the things that they have us do as reviewers is like look at people's data analysis. And there are rules that you should follow. You have to report things in great detail. You're not going to learn how to spot statistical lies in this class. You probably won't learn it in your statistics classes. I mean, this takes years of knowing data to spot these kind of like shifty things that people do with data, but you can spot them if you know how to spot them. And that's what the reviewers are doing. One of the things the reviewers are doing when they look at these peer-reviewed journal articles. So I'm the peer who's reviewing these journal articles, and I'm the guy usually who says, your statistics are not right. Like, everybody hates the statistics guy, but we're there to catch the shifty data stuff. And so this peer review process stops people from lying with statistics, like of doing something and saying like, there's a difference here, but actually there's not. When you get data from a source that isn't peer reviewed, news, magazines, things that are called preprints, which are journal articles that haven't been read by reviewers yet, self-published books, tweets, things on Facebook, anything that's not peer reviewed, but looks like they've done some sort of data, they put a graph on it. It doesn't mean that it's peer reviewed. It doesn't mean that it's right. They could be lying with statistics, because you can lie with statistics. But if you're looking at something that's peer reviewed, someone is there to make sure that lying can't happen. And they're real like nerdy about it, like me. You have to do this kind of test instead of the other. I can't imagine what people think about me when I send the reviews in. Anyway, and then lastly, masks don't work. That actually is not true. Masks do work. Not all of them work as well as others. These neck gaiter things like this dude has on, they don't work very well. In fact, there's some evidence that shows that they could be worse than not wearing one. If you're one of the in-person students at ASU, these are not, you have to still wear your masks at ASU. And these are not one of the accepted ones because they don't work very well. And of course, different ones have different degrees of efficiency. So this here in the middle that I'm showing you with this green kind of vapor, what you're looking at is no mask. This is when you put like a t-shirt over your face. It still gets out about 6 to 12 feet. Sorry. This is about 6 to 12 feet over here with no mask. This is quite a ways right here. And then if you wear a dual layer cloth mask, you can see that the breath vapor doesn't get very far away from your face at all. So they do work. We can scientifically prove that these do work. These keep in breath vapors. They don't get far away from your face, which means they don't get close to other people, which means if you're not pushing your mask up to somebody else, you're not taking in the same air that they're breathing out. So they do work, but not all equally. And then lastly, just hit on like what's going on psychologically. So talk about this Ash Conformity Study. What's going on is people would come into a room full of people. The room full of people are actually plants by the research team. They are just told to answer in a certain way. So there's really only one real participant in this whole group. But the participant thinks everybody in the room is there doing the study that they're doing. So the researcher would ask, like, hey, look at this reference line, and which line do you think most closely matches the length of that reference line? Looking at them right now, I'm sure that all of us probably agree that it's C. But what happens is they put their participant at the end of the table, and they go through all of the people that are part of the research team, and they'll all say A. And then by the time they get to the person who they're actually testing, they will almost always say A. When they ask them later, some people would say, well, I could tell it was C, but I just said A to go along, to not cause a ruckus. Some people actually said that they maybe initially thought it was C, but then as people were saying A, they realized that it was A, which means that their perception actually changed, which is interesting. In the same kind of study, they tell one of these members of the research team that the participant thinks are participants to actually say the real answer. And almost with everybody, what happens is when that person says the real answer, the participant who's an actual participant also says the real answer. And they kind of like look at each other and they're like, yeah, And they kind of like forge this bond over being the only two who see the right answer. They don't give it until that person says it. But if there's one person, then they feel bold enough to say, yeah, it is C. It's not A. You guys are crazy. That's the Ash Conformity Study. There's also another study, the Milgram Obedience Study, where participants were brought in and told to shock somebody. They weren't really shocking them. The person who they were shocking was another one of these members of the research team who people thought were a participant, but they weren't. And they would ask them like quiz show questions. And if they got it wrong, then the participant was supposed to flip a switch, which shocked the person answering. Again, it didn't. But then what this person would do is they would be like, oh, my heart, it feels weird when you shock me. And then the person running the study would say, that's not the right answer. Shock him again. And then they're like, please stop, let me out. And then the person says, like, that's not the right answer. Shock him again. And so they just have these people shock this participant a whole bunch of times until they faked unconsciousness or death or something like that. And, people went home at first thinking that they'd killed a guy. Then the study was stopped because people were having like really bad nervous reactions to thinking that they'd murdered someone. So then they started telling people, like, once they were done, they're like, look, it was all candid camera kind of thing. But they still went home feeling kind of having panic attacks because now they knew something about themselves. Like they would kill a person if someone who was in a perceived position of authority told them to, even if they didn't want to. And this is true. People usually will go along with someone in a position of authority or even a perceived position of authority. I mean, what real authority does a researcher have over you when you're just there to participate for, credit or a few bucks or something like that. They don't have anything. So, but they'll go along with it just because it seems like an authority figure. Well, the best way to avoid falling prey to both of these is simply knowing about them. The best way to not, when you're in a room of people who are saying that this reference line is A, the best way to not fall prey to that is by knowing about this study where people are going to say that it's A. And this is true for other situations as well. You know that something like that could be going on, and now you know that some people actually, their perception changes, and they actually see A as being the same length as the reference line. I don't know how that happens, but it does. And the best way to not fall prey to someone in a position of authority or perceived position of authority telling you to do something you don't agree with is by knowing about this Milgram obedience study, that people will do it just because someone tells them to. So now you know about it. Now you're not going to fall prey to it. And it might be the case that you could be that one member of the research team who says that the line is C and gets the person who's feeling like they know the right answer, but they're not going to say it, to go along with them. I think you can see how this pertains to what's going on with this global health crisis. If you're the person who is promoting that vaccines are safe and effective because they are, you might be able to get someone who thinks that they might be to join your team. You might be able to help other people realize that this is going to save lives. And the closer we get to herd immunity, the more lives we're going to save as well. So you should take this into these scientific principles like into your life as a health professional, a future health professional, a future scientist, and make them part of you now. And then lastly, there's this thing about eating the marshmallow. There's a study where children are come in, they're shown a marshmallow. The researcher says like, hey, I got to leave. Don't eat this marshmallow. If you don't eat the marshmallow, I'll give you 2 when I get back. Kids who don't eat the marshmallow just tend to do better in life later. And also they do get 2 marshmallows. I'm not a huge marshmallow fan, but I would assume cookies would work the same way. Like chocolate chip cookies. Also, you ever had a pumpkin cookie with chocolate chips in it? Awesome. If you're in a state where there's a Sprouts in fall, you need to get these cookies. They're fantastic. Anyway, what was I talking about? Yeah. If you don't eat the marshmallow, you tend to do better in life. This definitely pertains to right now, right? Like if you've only had one vaccine and all the friends are going out to do the things, you should wait to eat the marshmallow until you're 2 weeks out from that second vaccine, right? If you haven't had a vaccine yet, definitely don't eat the marshmallow. You need to wait for the second marshmallow. You want both marshmallows. It's much better to have both marshmallows. They end up with higher SAT scores, higher achievement test grades. We are not children, of course. I think one of the things that this does is this shows that these children are able to make themselves wait for better things later on. But you can learn this skill at any time. And of course, right now is one of those life and death times to actually learn that. But I've got my second vaccine, so I can actually go places. It's great. It's great to wait for the second cookie. It's amazing. You get 2 cookies. Okay, that's it. So there's a quiz on the syllabus that you need to take. Read the syllabus, and you'll do really well on that quiz. I'm going to give you one of the answers right now. The official means of communication for this class is your ASU email address. So make sure you're checking that. Sometimes I'll post announcements, and they go immediately to your email. Every semester I have a person who doesn't see an announcement. At the end of the semester, I'll tell you hey, check your grades and make sure they're okay. I have to turn them in on this day. And I'll get one or two people who, like 2 days after I had to turn them in, are like, oh, I didn't get extra credit on this thing I was supposed to get extra credit on. And I'll say, like, well, I already turned the grades in, but you had 3 days to look at it after my announcement, and then they didn't see the announcement because they didn't look at their email. Make sure you look at your email. And it may be that if you don't have your forwarding set up, it only gets to your ASU email. Sometimes, even if you do have forwarding set up, it only goes to your ASU email. I don't know why, but that happens. So the official means of communication is your ASU email address. Make sure you're checking that. Okay, so that's one of the quiz questions. Don't get that one wrong. And that's it. Have a great class. I will see you with varying lengths of hair because I'm using my best videos from throughout the last year. So you'll see a whole bunch of different hairstyles when you're looking through this. But and also I've got some great guest lectures from other professors in the speech and hearing sciences area. So it's going to be a great class. I think you're going to enjoy it. I will see you in the first discussion board where we kind of like talk a little bit about ourselves. I don't remember if I am having you talk about a movie or a book or a podcast or your favorite flavor of ice cream, but it's definitely one of those three. It's whichever one I was feeling that day when I wrote it out. So anyway, we'll talk about it. I'll see you in that discussion board soon. Okay,